Thank you for viewing this webinar. My colleagues Jeff Regensberger, Aaron Kelsey, and myself, Ann Kennedy, will be presenting about guiding Ohio online. If I can get the slides to progress. First, what is Guiding Ohio online? Guiding Ohio, or GOO as we call it, is an LSTA-funded grant whose goal is to allow Ohio libraries serving a rural population to hire a dedicated technology trainer for their library. The trainer can either be full or part-time depending on the needs of the library, and it runs from July 1st through June 30th. Today, we'll be talking about a brief history of the GOO program, then an overview of the current program, how your library can apply, and what the timeline for the process looks like. The GOO program was begun in program year 2014 and 2015 as an AmeriCorps program, and continued as such for the next 3 years. Partnering with AmeriCorps was a fantastic way to get this program off the ground, but it did have its challenges and limitations. We at the State Library reassessed the overall program and decided to make some changes. So beginning in program year 2017, 2018, we moved to a Library Services and Technologies Act, or LSTA, funded program. Since then, close to 50 libraries have participated in the program, the majority of whom are repeat participants. Speaking of repeat participants, please note that there was a recent change to the administration of this grant. Libraries who've been part of it for 5 years in a row will be required to take a 1-year hiatus after that 5th year. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So what are the benefits of the GOO program? Well, first, it's a cost-effective staffing solution for libraries. Essentially, you're getting a staff member for a quarter of the normal cost. Second, you're able to have a dedicated technology trainer on your staff. Many of you know how quickly patrons' technology questions can expand to suddenly a 45-minute session that you weren't expecting. Having a GOO trainer in your building can allow your current staff members to focus on their primary tasks. And finally, the program allows your library to try out new services or programs that you were unable to implement without the grant assistance. Excuse me. As I referenced before, the AmeriCorps program was somewhat limited. During that partnership, there were strict rules for what the member could and could not do in the library. And AmeriCorps was focused on serving working-age adults and assisting with workforce skill building. Programs for kids and teens were not part of the scope. And so when we were brainstorming on how to improve this program, we really wanted to help all age groups. So now digital literacy trainers can provide programming for all ages in your library with this grant. Under the GOO program, the digital literacy trainer is essentially a contract employee of the library. You will write a contract with the trainer for their services, and also keep in mind that they are being paid for the time that they work. So they don't earn benefits, vacation, sick time, nor do they have OPERS withheld. Your trainer won't have any, overall, they won't have any taxes withheld from their paycheck. So they will need to fill out a 1099 form for their own taxes. So this is something to keep in mind when you set their wage. Speaking of financial things, up next is Jeff.
Oh, thank you so much, Anne. Yeah, as to the finances of this, my name is Jeff Regensberger. I'm the LSTA coordinator here at the State Library of Ohio. So I do a lot of the work helping people, manage grants, figure out the budgets and the reporting requirements for the finances as well. So the first thing that I want to mention right out of the gate is that, for this program, Guiding Ohio Online, the LSTA grant will pay for 75% of the cost of the program, and your library is expected to provide a 25% cash match. Those payments that you get are made quarterly, with the first installment coming at the start of the grant term, and then the remaining payments coming in the subsequent quarters after your quarterly reports have been turned in and approved. I'll mention too that one of the things that the state library loves to see is partnerships between libraries. And we'd encourage you to reach out to libraries in your area to see if there's an opportunity to share a technology trainer or a digital literacy trainer with those other libraries. These partnerships will help you and the other libraries lower your matching funds and save you money. And we've had several libraries have successful partnerships over the years, so please keep that in mind as you're considering the GU grant. And on the subject of costs, I want to talk a little bit about how you'll calculate those and what those might look like. Anne mentioned that we don't really prescribe whether folks are going to be full time or part time, and we don't prescribe, how often they have to work. So this chart here, this table, gives you just some examples of what you might expect to spend, on a GU project, depending on how you scale it. Um, as an example, if your library hires a trainer and you anticipate that they're going to work 15 hours a week, that would be a total of 780 hours for the year. And it's your intention to pay them $15 an hour, then the total project cost is going to end up being $11,700. Now, remember, we talked about what LSTA would fund versus what the matching funds are. If it's $11,700 for a total project cost, the grant award would be for $8,775, and your library's 25% match would be $2,925. Similarly, in another example on the table, if you hire a trainer and anticipate they'll work 35 hours a week, which would be a total of 1,820 hours per year, and you want to pay them $17 an hour, then your total project cost is going to be $30,940, in which case the LSTA grant award would cover 75%, which is 23,205, and your library's 25% match would be 7,735. As mentioned, the library doesn't require the trainer work a certain number of hours, and we don't stipulate whether that person is full-time or part-time. You want that trainer working the amount of hours per week that works for your library and your community. I'll also caution people that because you're dealing with people, because you're dealing with contracted help, there is some ebb and flow to the expenses over the course of a grant term, and maybe you're not spending money as quickly as you thought you might. But for the purposes of budgeting and scheduling and programming, this table should be a good guideline for how you might figure out what your costs would be. And I think I throw it over to Erin Kelsey now. Erin?
Hi, everyone. My name is Erin Kelsey. I'm a library consultant at the State Library and on the Guiding Ohio Online Planning team. And I'm going to talk about, oh, you know what? I have to take control. Hold on. Sorry. Okay. Let's talk about the application and what to expect when applying. Our Guiding Ohio Online application is online on the link is right here, guidingohioonline.com, and we'll link that in the description for this video. when you go to the site to view the application, it will have the questions, the sample questions, and you can only do them in one sitting. So it's best to start a Word document, craft all of your amazing answers to these questions, and then when it's time to submit your application, you're ready to upload and copy and paste all of the information that you need. So the application is your opportunity to share how your library was innovative or creative in providing digital literacy and technology help to your community. So for current sites, you can share all of the success stories, all of the impact that you may have had on the community or with staff training. And for new sites, it's an opportunity to share what your community need is and how your library is trying to adapt to those changing needs or needs that have been amplified over the past couple years. And then how can that digital library trainer fill that need? What would be the plan for filling that need or providing access to that technology? And keep in mind, as we all know, program numbers don't always define success, so or a positive impact. So sharing those stories or feedback that you may have gotten from patrons who have utilized the digital library services or library trainer services. Is a great way to tell your story and how you would use the trainer or how they have impacted the library in your community. So also, when crafting your answers, don't assume that the review committee knows what program acronyms mean or library jargon or any of the insider details of your library programs and services. So make sure to really spell that out and not use some of that library jargon. You can view the questions on the state library's website, like I said, guidingohioonline.com, and you can download the proposed budget form and signature form. So as Jeff was sharing in the slide before, you'll have to note, in your budget how you're going to spend your money on materials you might need, on how much you're going to be paying your contract employee, and you'll need to submit and upload the budget and signature forms along with your answers to the questions that we have. And I think I said this before, and you'll have to do that in one sitting, so you can't save and then come back to it. So just make sure you have all your documents filled out and ready to go once it's time to submit. And a reminder that you can submit a draft for our team to review, and we recommend that you do so. You can submit drafts through March 18th, which gives us some time to review it and get it back to you in case you need to make any revisions before the application due date of March 25th. But submitting a draft is a great way to just get feedback and tighten up or add more information if needed, and it can really set your application apart, getting that feedback from our team. All right, I think next is Jeff to share more information about budgeting.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Aaron. Yeah, I want to talk in a little bit more detail about the items that you're going to end up seeing on your proposed budget form that you'll be turning in when you apply. The first line item that you're going to see is for the contract amount. And as we've discussed, that's specifically what your trainer will be paid over the course of the grant term. So you're going to be taking that hourly rate that your library decides on. You're going to be multiplying that by the number of hours that you expect your trainer to work during that grant term, July 1 to June 30th. And Anne mentioned this, and I'll say it again because I think it's an important distinction to make. Remember that these the people that you're hiring, the digital technology trainers, are contracted persons. So they are not salaried staff, and their payment will not include OPERS, health care, benefits, paid time off, any of those things. It's specifically contract work, hours worked times the hourly rate. The second thing that you'll see on that proposed budget form is a line item for travel. If you've got multiple locations and you're expecting your trainer to travel between those locations or go to events that are off-site, then you'll want to consider how mileage and paying for mileage might impact your budget, and do, the best mileage calculation that you can figure to um, to have something to put in the travel line. The next line on there is going to be for services. These are proposed costs that will include basically services that you might have to pay for. Typically, for this grant, that's something like background checks for your trainers. If you've got a third party that you're using to process the payroll, or if you're using, professional printers to do, publicity materials and things like that, those would be included under services. And the last line is for supplies. And that's there if you anticipate having to purchase additional supplies or materials for your trainer, or to support the work that your trainer is doing, then you will put those in supplies. I can't remember if we mention it here or in the documentation on the web, but if you are purchasing supplies, we will ask that you make those purchases at the beginning of the grant term. So if you set aside $500 for supplies, we want to see that money spent in that first quarter of the grant term. Lastly, if you're planning on sending your trainer to any continuing education opportunities like webinars, workshops, or conferences, you'll want to make sure that you find a place for those um, in the contract as well. It seems pretty specific, and it'll feel specific when you're filling it out because you're going to be asked to put in numbers. And we recognize that the numbers don't always match reality, but we do hope that as you're crafting your budgets and you're putting together a budget for this project, that you're being as thorough and as accurate and thinking through what you might end up spending money on, and doing that as accurately as possible. Um, and lastly, if you're submitting a draft prior to the final proposal, as Aaron suggested, we'd ask that you include that proposed budget in your draft as well. Um, the tips that we can offer for the budget and application is, just remember that you're not required to have a line item in every budget category. If you're a single library and you don't have to buy anything for your trainer, and you don't have to buy any supplies, and you don't anticipate any travel costs, it's fine to just have one item in that list. Secondly, if you've already got a technology trainer on staff, or you have an IT person, ask them what kind of supplies might be useful, what kind of things you might be able to buy to help support the GU trainer. And if you're a new site, talk to your frontline staff. Ask them, what kind of technology do you think would be helpful for a GU trainer? What kind of things do you think we should have on site for our new GU trainer? And as with any grant, I think if you've got questions or problems or concerns along the way, feel free to reach out to any of us and ask. We're always happy to help answer questions of the in advance of the submission. Aaron mentioned that you are welcome to submit a draft. You can send that to the email address lsta@library.ohio.gov. We're always happy to look at submissions and help people kind of fine tune what they're getting at. I like to tell people that we've never made a grant proposal worse. I think that we can always make them better. So feel free to take advantage of that. The deadline is again March 18th, 2024. That gives us plenty of time to look over everybody's work, and it will give us time to get it back to you so that you can make those changes before that final application is due on March 25, 2024. I'll mention this part again too. I know Ann talked about it early, but please remember that there are a limited number of consecutive years that a library can participate in the GOO program. Libraries that have been awarded GOO funds 5 consecutive years will be required to take a year off. And this is basically for us to ensure that the LSTA funds don't become relied upon for ongoing or operational expenditures. IMLS stipulates that their grant money is not for operational expenditures. So if your library sees a need for a dedicated technology trainer in your community and you see a consistent need and you've taken advantage of GOO for a number of years, that might be the time where it's worth considering whether you can devote library resources directly to that need. And with that, I will throw it back to Ann Kennedy for us.
Thank you, Jeff. And one thing that we also wanted to mention is if you have any additional questions that either aren't covered in this webinar or on any of the web information on our website, you can drop in for an open office hours on Thursday, February 22nd at 1 p.m. And just drop in and we'll all answer questions there. Okay, so deadline has come. March 25th now has passed. You've turned yours in. What happens next? So applications will be reviewed at the end of April and until the review committee meets later that month. So in that meeting, the review committee decides which applications will be taken to the State Library Board for final approval. The review committee in that time may come back to your library with a revised budget or with some additional questions. So just be prepared for that. Next, once we have the list of applications that will be moving forward, we'll take those to the State Library Board at the May 16th board meeting. And if your library is recommended for approval to the board, you will be notified of that fact. Jeff?
Thank you, Ann. After approval. Yeah, so after approval, your first installment of the grant funds will be sent once we've received your completed and signed documents and after the grant term starts on July 1st. We do ask that you don't encumber or spend any money related to the project until after July 1st. Technically, the funds, local matching and LSTA funds are only supposed to be spent within the grant terms. So be mindful of that. Also, it's a good idea to make yourselves familiar with the reporting requirements. Because GOO relies on quarterly payments and quarterly reports, there's a little bit more documentation required of this grant than most of our LSTA grant initiatives. We do try to keep it simple, and a lot of the documentation you need is to fill them out is found on our website. But if you do have any questions, I'll say again, Ann Kennedy is our expert on the narrative reports, and I can help answer any of the questions that you might have related to the financial reporting. Obviously, after you're officially approved, you can start looking for your trainer. It's good to have the trainer in place as soon as possible. So begin crafting that job description that you'd like to use to advertise the position, create or modify any existing accounts or contracts that you might have, and then begin your search. We do have examples of the contract and job description available on our website, but do make sure that you customize those to match your library, what you're doing, and what you're going to need um, for a trainer. Obviously, it's best to have the trainer in place, if at all possible, for the July 1st start date. And that's simply because it'll help you get a good start on spending that grant award, as quickly as possible and as you've proposed. So, Anne?
Thank you, Jeff. So you've been approved, you've gotten your money, you've returned your contract. After July 1st, your trainer can start working. Um, so then you can start beginning your programming and gathering all of your statistical information for those quarterly financial and narrative reports that Jeff mentioned. Now, we do suggest that the program coordinator, aka the supervisor, sets up a regular touch base meetings with your digital literacy trainer and with your library's fiscal agent, just to make sure the report process is a really smooth one. We have found that libraries who do have those regular meetings just have a stronger overall program. Erin?
Okay, sorry. So just to kind of wrap things up here, after your start date, after your trainer gets started working, as Anne and Jeff have both said, you will have to submit those financial and narrative reports. So we've got the due dates and the date ranges for each quarter. And I will say again, because this is how just to put more emphasis on it, that having those regular check-ins with your fiscal officer and with your digital literacy trainer, having those meetings already on the books or happening in a regular fashion really makes the process of reporting out much easier and makes the program stronger. So it's definitely something we recommend. And after your quarterly financial and narrative reports are submitted, they have to be improved by the state library, and your payment for the next quarter will not be processed until both reports have been received and approved. And another note, I think this was mentioned earlier, is that any supplies that you might need to be purchased in the first quarter, because hopefully if you're needing and asking for supplies in your budget, you need them right away when the trainer starts. So any of those any of those things under the supplies line item should be purchased in the first quarter. And then that is all we have today. So feel free to send any project-related questions to Ann Kennedy, and her email is here. Any funding-related questions, or if you want to submit a draft of your application, submit any questions or a draft to lsta@library.ohio.gov. The deadline for submitting those drafts is March 18th. And like Anne had said, we are hosting open office hours on February 22nd at 1 p.m. It's pretty informal. You can drop in, ask a question. We're all going to be in the office hours to answer any questions you have or give any feedback. If there are other sites, other libraries, logging in at the same time, you might be able to get some information from them about how their program has gone, what they've learned along the way. So definitely recommend the open office hours and submitting a draft. So thank you all so much for listening, and please reach out with questions, and we hope to be in touch with you all soon and look forward to seeing your applications.
Hey, thanks everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks.